around a reference point. No need to reinvent the circle since you're only getting level base. The travel is the new skill that gets introduced at Juvenile, and it becomes a key feature as they move up the development pathway to future categories. So as you're teaching a traveling circle, it's really important to have the skaters focusing on skating around the circular path, following the natural path of the circle, rather than stepping into the circle. We can see that from the technical panel, and that's when we start to call travel assist, when you see skaters not skating this way, but skating this way, up a straight line. It becomes quite obvious with weaker teams trying to do travels. Some of the more skilled teams can hide it, but in the circle it becomes very obvious how the hip goes this way as opposed to following the curve of the circle. For the moves element, in order to be called level base, you have to have at least one free skate movement. In this element, you can have up to 4 different FMs, which means you can do forward, inside, outside spirals, all done together if you wanted to. But you just need to have at least one to do level base. If you're doing a change of edge, it has to occur at the same time. And if you are doing an interaction, you can have a mirror image pattern. As you all know, the free skate movement has to be held for a minimum of 3 seconds in the correct position and the correct edge. So if you go flat or if the leg drops during that 3 seconds and then you drop your foot to the ice, the free skate movement will not be called. A free skate movement that has more than one change of edge, each edge has to be held for 2 seconds if you're doing a change of edge free skate movement. And as we've already talked about for Juvenile, unsupported spiral from Appendix C in the Skate Canada technical document.
Can I add something to that one?
Yes, you can.
You can do up to 4 FMs, but you have to have at least 4 skaters doing 1 FM. So if you have 8 skaters, you can only have 2 different FMs because you have to have at least 4 doing the same one. Does that make sense?
Thank you for the clarification, Christine. The other elements just have very simple basic requirements. As you all know, for the intersection, all the skaters have to be involved in the intersection. For the no-hold element, the published guideline is there must be 4 lines of 4, and this applies to a team of 16. If you have less than 16 skaters, the lines have to be as equal as possible. This has been clarified in, the one thing I did read in 1967 is they outline the configuration of the no-hold element based on the number of skaters you have in your team. So reference that when you're trying to figure out what your configuration should be. And domestically, we do allow you to have uneven numbers in lines when you are changing access. You must start off your block, your no-hold element, and the movement you are going down the ice in a configuration that has the lines as close to equal as possible, okay? But during the change of access, they can become uneven.
Also, that's a change from last year. So if you had 9 skaters, it would be 3-3-3 this year, correct?
Correct, yeah. Pair elements. You can only do the pair element if you have a team of 16. If you don't, you cannot choose it for your Group B selection. This is the ISU requirement, not a domestic requirement, but we are not going to adopt a different policy domestically. For the spin element, all skaters have to attempt the spin, and it must occur in a closed block formation. The spin must either be an upright spin or a variation of an upright. You cannot do a synchronized sit spin together or a synchronized intermediate position. The rotating wheel, the spoke requirements, if you're doing wheel base or up to wheel 2, 3 skaters per spoke. Wheel 3 through wheel 4, you have to have 4 skaters per spoke. Similar to the rotating circle, a minimum of 360 in one rotational direction or a combination of 360 in total. And if you are doing 2 configurations or 2 changes, if you're doing a change of direction, you have to do at least 90 degrees in the one rotation.
Andrew?
Yes?
What would happen if a skater is injured on a pair element?
It will not be called. You'll have to execute it. We had 2 instances of that last year where in competition the team only had 15. You do it, it just doesn't get called, unfortunately. Creative element. Everyone has to participate in the element somehow, but only 4 skaters are required to do the prescribed movement. The other skaters can be doing side dancing, they can be standing still and reflecting the music, but you need at least 4 doing the movement or the FEFM in order for the creative element to be confirmed. The combined element, you have to have at least 2 different synchronized skating elements, and all skaters have to participate in it, and the chosen basic elements have to interact with each other in a way that they come through. You can't just skate around each other. You have to actually come towards each other in some capacity. The easiest thing to do is to actually intersect to show you've interacted. Okay. Part C is where we start to look at examples and start to talk about some features. This presentation is designed a little bit about looking at some of the common errors that occur and reasons why the technical panel will not award a particular feature for an attempted level. So we're going to assess risk versus reward and kind of give you some guidance on things you should do and should avoid. One of the key things for you guys to remember is that the ISU makes these rules and calling specifications with junior and senior teams in mind, not with pre-novice. So while there is a variety of options for you, the higher level elements are definitely designed to match the skill set of teams competing at Worlds in the top groups. There is a development spectrum across the world. That's why there are level 1 and level 2 elements, because not all of the teams are of the same skill set across the world. But just because there is this plethora of options doesn't mean you should choose the highest scoring one, because it may not be the best option for your team. So you have to understand matching the risk involved with a particular level or a feature, an additional feature that you're trying to attempt, against the skills and capabilities of your team. Oftentimes, if you attempt a higher level and feature and it's done poorly, it's going to result in the team not getting the call. The judging panel is going to have a negative GOE, and you're going to lose more points than you thought you would possibly be able to gain if you actually got the call correctly done in the first place. Rule of thumb, just because you're allowed to do it doesn't mean you should. So let's think smart when we're doing things. I'm going to give you a little bit of an execution scenario. Who's coaching pre-novice? Excellent. Okay. You can do a traveling circle this year. You can be called no higher than level 3. You decide to choreograph traveling circle 3. The highest you can do, base value 4.5. This requires you to do 360-degree rotation in one direction. You have to travel at least 10 meters unassisted with circle within a circle, rotating opposite directions. And you have to have one use of weaving. In competition, your team executes the weave incorrectly, which causes your travel to stall. It doesn't travel more than 5 meters. End result, tech panel has to call it traveling circle 1, which goes to a base value of 2.0. The judges awarded GOE of -2. Not very good. You've already lost 2.5 points, and now the judges have taken off more because they've given you a negative GOE. Attempted base value was 4.5. The awarded base value, 2.0. -2 GOE, if you look at Communication 1966, which is a scale of values, results in you losing an additional 0.6 points from that base value. So instead of getting the 4.5 you were trying, you end up getting 1.4. This is an example of the scale of values for the traveling element, traveling circle. If you had tried level 2, base value would have been 3.0. If you did a traveling circle 2, which doesn't require you doing the weave, and the judges gave you a GOE between -1 and +1, you would have earned anything between 2.5 and 4.0 points. You still would have gotten more for doing a traveling circle 2 with a negative GOE than you did for attempting a traveling circle 3 very poorly and getting a severely negative GOE. So it's all in the math. That's why it's important to look at 1966, figure out the difference in base value and how a negative GOE can reduce your base value score even further from an element just lower than the one you're trying to attempt that may be more within the skill set of your team. Here's an example of a team attempting an element outside their range of skill. This is a traveling circle 3 attempt. There's chuckles. This happens more often than we like it to happen. Oftentimes on tech panel, we're just like, we say why? Like, why are you attempting this? This is clearly a team that is having difficulty just doing circle within a circle to begin with. Then they're trying to travel it, which is the requirement, but they're trying to do this weave at the same time. They traveled maybe 20 centimeters correctly, maybe not even that. So this example is to serve a point that there are coaches that still do this, because in her head she's saying, this is the highest base value I can get for my category, so I'm going to do all the highest elements. Traveling circle 3, attempt base value 4.5. She probably would have gotten called traveling circle base, if even.
It was a no value.
It was a no value call. So therefore, instead of getting 4.5 points, she now has nothing. Or he, it could be a he. Yeah, and then there's the required reduction for skating to Shania Twain. So that is like another disaster. Okay? We all love Shania, let's be honest. So pivoting blocks. Everyone is doing a pivoting block this year. Okay? It's prescribed in every category. However, there is a significant skill change between pivoting block 1 and pivoting block 2. Pivoting block 1 only requires 90 degrees of pivoting. Pivoting block 2 requires 180 degrees with a change of pivot point. And that is a skill that not everyone can master as easily as others. So it's up to you as a coach to determine whether or not level 1 or level 2 is the right attempt for the skill set of your team. So the most common errors we observe in pivoting block 2 is that the pivoting motion is not continuous as the pivoting ends change, okay? We're gonna take a look at a few examples to point out some common errors in pivoting. This is not their pivot yet, this is just a fan. So this is the first pivot point, their first turn. And now they start going up the ice instead of pivoting around. So we'll take a look at that again. Yeah. So watch this angle right here. They're going forward instead of actually now they're pivoting again, coming down. So the ends didn't go, it didn't pivot and then pivot simultaneously like that. It was a pivot, a glide, and then a secondary pivot after that. That was pivoting block 2 attempt at Senior Worlds. So, large skill set. And see how that one came straight forward towards the end there?
Watch the two bottom lines in that one. The top one still sort of maintains their pivoting action. The two bottom lines are just moving forward. They're not actually pivoting action anymore. They're not pivoting. They're skating straight forward.
See how they just went straight towards the boards on that one? They didn't even attempt to change the pivot end, they just went to the side. Watch these guys right here. Let's go. And then this ends, keeps going. So that was a very, very poor attempt at a pivot right there. So these three were just examples of the pivoting block 2 attempts that have the simple choice of turns and steps. For those of you who are thinking of attempting pivoting block 3 or 4 that have this series of turns on one foot, just be careful. Because it could look like this. Watch the entry edges of these attempted turns. It's supposed to be a back inside rocker. Comes out forward. That's a bracket, not really. They're not pivoting anymore. That was their third turn, like it was just so silly. And then there was the Beyonce reduction that you had to take as well. So, disaster. So here's an example of a very simple pivoting 2 block, and just watch how seamless the pivot actually happens. For the record, I have not put in any Canadian teams for the most part. There are a few. This is one of them. Any official or listening, do not let this bias your opinion if you ever judge this team. It was just an example that I found that I thought was good. And there's also another one. So it's important. We try to do non-Canadian examples as much as we can. Sometimes we can't help it. It wasn't super fast, but it was seamless. There wasn't a pause in the pivot. So from a technical perspective, the pivot is fine. From a judging perspective, the GOE wouldn't go up because the pivot didn't have a lot of speed to it. But it wasn't executed incorrectly. It was executed correctly, so it would get the call. So that one was quite smooth as well. They did simple turns, they maintained the speed of the pivot, they were able to execute it correctly. Senior team at Senior Worlds, knowing their capabilities, not attempting a pivoting block 3 in the short program. They want to get the call and a GOE of 0 or up to +2 to keep their score competitive. Attempting a pivoting block 3 would have probably gotten them a pivoting block 1 call and a minus GOE. So this coach played up to her team's strength for this prescribed element in the short program, and she was rewarded accordingly for that. Here's another correct pivoting block example. So that was executed correctly, and it was executed with good speed and momentum. So in addition to getting the call, the judging panel will be able to award a positive GOE for the elements as a whole. And one more example of a well-executed pivoting block 2. Even though she used that pump at the pivoting point, it still had turns and linking steps, and they were able to actually keep the pivoting ends rotating simultaneously together and move forward. So that was well done, configuration, speed. It would get the call for meeting the criteria, and it's also a positive GOE from the judging panel. Questions about pivoting blocks? Takeaway message, don't do pivoting block 3 if you can't. Okay, traveling circles. Features required for traveling circle 3 and 4 are very difficult, as you saw from the example I showed before. You should choose wisely based on the skill level of your team. The travel distance is measured using the center point of the circle and the length of the ice surface, or a comparable distance if you're rotating it around a circle. And the travel has to be continuous, so if there is a break in the travel or a travel assist, we call the ice coverage at that point. Skaters, as I mentioned before, need to focus on skating around the circular path and not stepping into the circle. Most common errors that we get for dropping a level are insufficient ice coverage for the required level you're attempting, incorrect execution of the weaving feature for traveling circle 3 and 4, and any assisted travel which involves stepping into the circle. This is an example of an incorrect traveling circle 2. You see the skaters going in towards the circle as opposed to coming around, if they're even in a circle to begin with. Yeah. So we'll just look at that again towards the end. You want to point it out on the screen?
Back up. More. Stop.
Now they go up.
And now they keep moving again. So we're looking at the element as a whole. I will say that most of the traveling errors in a circle, traveling circle, happen in the middle circle. It is more difficult. You're trying to avoid the people on the outside. You're trying to move at the same speed as them. My eyes go right to the middle.
Yeah. On the weave at this point. You'll notice as they're coming in to do the weave, they're actually stalling the circles themselves. You can watch it again.
The weave also has to happen at the
Same time.
in both circles. So when I notice that you're starting to weave, I kind of let everything. And if I see it looks like this, I know that you're not actually weaving at the same time.
So these guys are right in late, so that wouldn't count. And those ones right there, and that one. So that's incorrect execution of the weaving feature. Again, watch the middle circle in this one. Has a late weave right there to begin with on the end. See that girl right there? She was stepping into the circle as opposed to going around, and then the middle circle had neutralized down here before they went into their second weave, so there was a variety of errors happening in that circle as well. Let's watch that one more time. Watch the weave right here. She just gets in right there in the corner, way after everyone else. That skater right there. That skater right there. Lots of instances of stepping into the circle, and the weave was done incorrectly both times. Correct traveling circle 2. So this team is doing a circle within a circle and traveling it up the ice. No weaving features. So, travel was fine, rotation was fine, quality of the circles not so much. So correct call, be impacted by the GOE in this case from the judging panel. And here's an example of a correct weaving and traveling circle. So she was a bit smart on that one. She kept the middle circle a little bit larger than it normally would be, so when the weaves happened, they were actually able to happen simultaneously. She probably realized her skaters, because of the speed they were going and the speed of the music, they weren't going to be able to do the weave if they were that far out, because they were doing shallow movements to get through. So she played it smart by keeping those circles closer together, and she was able to keep the travel going. She almost got in trouble at the very beginning because it almost looked as though the weave was happening before they actually started to travel. Travel has to happen, and then the first weave can be attempted. It can't be attempted on a stationary rotating circle, but they actually started to move down the ice right before the weave actually started. Any questions on weaving or traveling circles in general? Dana Lee?
Does it have to be just a visual travel? There's no limit before you can leave? Just has to look like there's...
Yeah.
Recognizable.
That's where it is before.
Yeah. Yeah, that gives you level base regardless of what you do.
No, but before you leave,
Before you weave, yeah.
just recognize.
Yeah, there's no distance required. It's just like as soon as you start to move, then we recognize it and the first weave can occur. Okay, the no-hold element. There's a lot of options for you to choose from to get the no-hold element level that you're looking for. So our advice is to play it smart and do the simpler skills that the skaters can execute. The element is quite long, so the more you start to attempt in order to get an element level called will potentially impact the GOE as the element becomes far sloppier than it would be had you not attempted so many things in an effort to get the element call. You have 5 options. You can do a twizzle series, and the twizzle needs to be executed correctly in order to count towards the level, the same way it would to count towards the step feature. You can do pivoting. This is new. This is interesting. We don't have an example of a no-hold block pivoting yet, so if you're going to attempt it, good luck. Change of access. Quite simple. You can do long axis, short axis, or diagonal in your block if you want to, in your element. Change of position skater lineup. Those are those little movements we see where the outer lines become the inner lines. If your skaters can do that together, doesn't have to be done together. Doesn't have to be done together to get the feature call, but it'll impact the GOE if it's not done correctly. Yeah, doesn't have to be perfect like the weave does. And then you can do these extra features. So there's 4, you have to do 4 in total, and only a maximum of 2 from each group. You can select between free skate movements. These are toe steps, not toe stops. Toe steps, hops, and jumps, or the body movements that have an obvious core change to them, okay? So this is not a body movement in the no-hold element. It actually has to have some kind of dimension change, forward, backwards, up, and down. This question came up last year from an Adult 2 coach. You can attempt as many of the 5 features that you want in order to attain your element level that you're trying to go for. So if you're only allowed to go up to no-hold element 2, you only need to have 2 features in order to be awarded that element level. You can attempt all 5 of them until you get 2. However, you're not going to get a higher call than what the category is limited to. Despite the number of correct features you do, if you do all 5 of them correct, you're still only going to get element number 2. If you're trying 5 to get 2, you're still only going to get 2. So you can do 3 different features in the effort to correctly execute 2 of them, hopefully, so that you'll have your NH2 element call. Again, be careful when you try too much, because it is quite a long element. And this is where we see a lot of elements in the no-hold element can start off very well, and then as you start to add more to it towards the end, it just becomes a free skating jumbled mess. So be cautious about what you do, because it's going to have an impact on the GOE from the judging panel as well. And this is, when you're thinking about the step feature, again, recognize the difference between what's required for step 2 and what's required for step 3 and step 4. Step 3 and 4 have specific challenges in them, being the triple twizzle. 1 required for step 3 and double triple twizzles required for step 4. That's outside the twizzle for the feature in the element itself. And 3 and 4 also include series of turns on 1 foot, okay? We will be looking for correct entry and exit edges. If you cannot do them on 1 foot cleanly, you will not get a step 3 or 4 call. Pardon?
Two also increases.
On 1 foot?
Two turns.
Yeah, 2 turns on 1 foot for 2, but we're talking about the 3 difficult turns for 3 and 4. So here's an example of a team trying turns that are outside their capability. That's not a rocker. It's a really bad mohawk. That's not a twizzle. That's not a Choctaw. Yeah. Not twizzles. So they were doing way too many things outside of their capabilities, so they wouldn't get the level they were trying to for the steps, and the judging panel would definitely not be able to award anything positive for the quality of those turns that they were attempting. So in essence, this coach would end up losing probably 3 or 4 points more than she would have gained had she tried something simpler on the step 1 level and gotten a positive GOE. A second example. Like, she's trying every feature possible in this example, including doing 2 at the same time, and her skaters are not of that skill to be able to do that. Even the simple turns, she didn't have the difficult turns in there. She was only doing 3 turns in mohawks and maybe an occasional twizzle to try to get the feature for the element. She tried a body movement and the change of position at the same time, and she tried the change of axis at the same time as the second body movement, and then she attempted to do, I don't know what that was at the end. So the focus should have been on doing clean 3 turns in mohawks and maybe a single twizzle, and getting these features done correctly with some speed rather than attempting all of this at one time. Here's an example of a simple and well executed no-hold element. So, 3 turns in mohawks. They were clear. There were definite edges to them. She changed axis. She changed position. She knew that's what they could do well. They had good speed, good unison, nothing above their capabilities. We look at this and that's a positive element. Even though it's simple, even though it's a level 1, step 1, it's a positive aspect. She had tried something higher than that, it would have caused us to reduce the GOE. So in essence, she gains points as opposed to losing them because she played it smart up to her skater's capabilities. If you feel like you have a team that you want to try the no-hold element 3, not the step 3, but the element 3, which requires the twizzle series to be clean, this is an example of what we're looking for. So those twizzle attempts were clean, they were continuous, they had definite entry and exit edges. She didn't try the difficult series of turns on 1 foot for the higher step level. She just went for the execution of the twizzles to get the element call higher than an element level 2. Okay? So that's what you need to demonstrate if you're going for no-hold element group 3, that kind of clean twizzle to get that feature. Any questions of the no-hold element? Okay, moves element. As we mentioned before, most common errors are incorrect edges executed during the free skate movement or incorrect position, most notably in the spiral and the Ina Bauer. So for the spiral, the rule used to be free foot had to be at hip level, and it was changed 2 years ago. Free foot has to be above the hip level now in order for the position to be counted. We can easily spot fake Ina Bauers. We are high up. We can see the back line. If you put the weaker skaters back there, we can also hear them. So don't try to attempt an Ina Bauer if your skaters cannot do it, because it becomes painfully obvious. So for moves element 2 and moves element 3, you have two options to consider. You have to do one of them for moves element 2, and you have to do both of them for moves element 3. You can either choose to do two different free skate moves that interact, or you can execute a change of position by half the team. For moves element 3, both of these have to occur. Interaction, as you all know, means that you have to come within close proximity to each other somehow, either in a mirror image pattern like this, or through an intersection, or through some kind of movement where the team gets towards each other. So, errors increase when you guys attempt features that are beyond the skill set of the team. The change of position in the spiral is not an easy skill to perfect. So if you don't have skaters that can keep the leg above the hip level while executing that, I don't suggest you do it. Go for the ME2, where you do two different free skate moves that interact with each other rather than attempt the change of position, because it could cause you to lose the free skate movement call because the foot will drop below. Here are some poorly executed positions. Putting your head closer to the ice does not result in your leg going higher. Okay? So don't use that as a training technique, please. Or bending your knee does not allow that to happen. So I think the errors in the spiral position were quite clear from that example. And about half of them that were at hip level before the change of edge went down after the change of edge. So she would have been, or he would have been better served to just do a simple moves element 1, FM1, and get a non-negative GOE. Here's another example of an error during a change of position. I want you to look at this corner of the screen, right here. So those spirals to the left. So all of those legs start going like this. That's clearly not a skill that this team can do, but they thought because they were senior they should attempt it, and they would have been better served to actually just attempt better spirals and not get a reduction in the element call and a negative GOE as well. Here's an example of some very good quality positions. Judges, remember, we talked this morning, we haven't even gotten to that stuff for the judges yet, but yesterday with the coaches and the skaters, we talked about flexibility and aesthetically pleasing positions to attain higher GOEs. This is an example of that. So, those skaters clearly have the skill to execute that. That's an example where if your team can do that, I would encourage you to try, because I would give that a +3, and I would love to see it. But if you can't do it, don't put your foot over your head. Nope. So those spread eagles, she did the change of edge and position on the spread eagles. You could see the one lobe come in, the second lobe come in. Even usually when teams do an inside spread eagle, it could get quite sloppy. That one had a definite clean inside edge coming around. They were able to change the position and execute the second spread eagle on the outside edge correctly. Got a little flat towards the end, but they had already achieved the required 2 seconds in the correct position. And the spirals were also done relatively well, and they interacted quite nicely with each other. So those were good positions overall. So an example of a change of position that was done correctly, change of edge done correctly, an element that started off positive and slowed down a lot and maybe lost a little bit of quality towards the end. So it would get a call that was correct for what she was intending, and from a judging perspective, you may have a reduction in your GOE. So here she went to get the base value and took a hit on the GOE, which is a call that you as a coach can sometimes make depending on what the gain and loss is. Hence, you should really study 1966 and figure out what's the better risk reward, getting the element call in a 0 or getting the next level lower and a +1. Last year, we introduced this fabulous new thing called the combination element. And we had no examples last year with which to use for teaching. And it was hard to figure out what was the best option to advise coaches between the choice of creative or combined. Last year, I would say 25% of the teams attempted a combined element, maybe less. Domestically, not so much. Internationally, some of the teams did 20%, we saw a combined element. Has a fixed value, as you guys all know. It's either going to be called confirmed or not confirmed. And the chosen elements have to interact with each other. You have a choice between 5 things: block, circle, intersection, line, and wheel. And these are the requirements for whatever you choose to have. You're choosing a block. It's got to be 3 lines and 8 skaters in total. Circle's got to have a minimum of 6. Intersection has a minimum of 8 people who intersect. Not 8 in a line, but 8 in total involved. The line has to have a minimum of 8 skaters in one line, or 2 lines of 4 skaters in each. And the wheel, if you're doing 2 spokes, you have to have 3 skaters in each spoke. And if you're doing a single pinwheel, it has to have 5 skaters in total.
So one spoke.
Pardon?
Pinwheel can have-
Oh, the one rotating
It's the one-
spoke.
It has to have 5.
Yeah. Here's an example of an incorrect combination element that would not be confirmed because it does not interact correctly. That does not constitute interaction at any means possible. Maybe they got close to coming to each other at the very beginning, but those were 2 separate elements happening around each other. Here's an example of a poorly executed, but correctly executed combination element. So there was a wheel and and a line, and they intersected. It was just a little funny about what happened to both of those things kind of during the whole process. So it would be confirmed, and we as judges would say -7 for that, because that was not very good. And here's a standard combination element. So you have a pinwheel in the middle, 6 skaters, you have 2 lines coming through, and they intersect with each other. Interestingly enough, this combination element used to actually be categorized as a group 3 intersection, collapsing shape, and it was taken out a few years ago, and now it's back as a combo element with less value. And here's another example of an acceptable combination element. So you have an intersection of 8 skaters, and you have a line. So even though they didn't intersect through the line, the 2 intersections happened and it went through that space. So it's an interesting example. Not the smartest choice, I would think, because the intersection doesn't look that great, but it definitely meets the criteria, and the elements did interact through each other. Oh, the bane of my existence.
Ours too.
The creative element. Highly variant. You see things that are genius. You see things that are excessively long and have so much in them. You have to remember, we don't assess difficulty in the creative element. It can contribute to your skating skills mark depending on what you decide to execute. But all we're assessing is the 4 movements that are done and the interaction that happens around it. It's very important for you to realize if you make a 30-second long creative element, even if you do 6 perfectly well-executed axles in total unison, but your skaters who are doing a shimmy-shimmy in the corner fall on their face, that's what gets reduced for. Like, you have to think about all these excessive things you're doing and make sure that it all contributes evenly to the quality of the movement. So we're looking at the quality of the movements that you're going to choose and how the movements reflect the music. A lot of times we see these creative elements that just throw out some kind of movement and it has no relation to the music at all. And it's supposed to reflect the character of the music every time that it's being executed. We talked about this yesterday, coaches. Don't put in free skate elements or free skate moves that your skaters can't do well because they get judged the same way they do in singles and pairs and ice dance. Don't do flying camels that are done incorrectly. If you're doing jumps together, they have to take off and land together. Spins have to rotate evenly. The layback and the sit position has to be the same quality as it would in singles. Don't do a death spiral if you really can't do a death spiral, or a pivot if you can't do a proper pivot. Select the right moves for your team. Make sure they're done with nice quality and deep edges, and just try to keep it, just because it's simple is not going to mean it's not going to score well, okay? Unison is very important as well with the free skate movements and free skate elements. They all have to be done at the same time. This is an example of a poorly executed creative element that meets the criteria. So those were some spread eagles that were like super slow, kind of flat, goes to an inside spread eagle that's not very good, and there's this little assisted jump that really doesn't have any quality to it. So that's a pretty underwhelming creative element without any quality to it. He or she could have done so much more with that, but chose not to. Okay, this is an example of doing way too much and not doing it together. I want you to try to watch as much as you can and see how many errors you can spot. Butterfly first. Should have stopped there. So, the butterflies were fine. Then she attempts to do this death spiral at the front that none of them were done correctly. And then there is this upright backward front position spin where none of the skaters are spinning together and none of the skaters exit the spin together. Had she done the butterfly and then done some accessory movements, that would have been perfectly fine. The quality was there, it enhanced the music, it had the 4 skaters, but she went and did more. And you have to keep taking a look at everything that keeps happening. If it's the first element or the last element of the program, we judge everything from the time the music starts until your transition into the next element is very clear. Or if it's the last element, every single thing you do until the music stops. So even if you fall hitting the end position, it's still the creative element. So you have to be smart about what you put in. Here's another example of a lot of free skating movements put in together and not all of them being done together. Let's watch that again. We have flying camels happening at the top. They're all doing them separately. Then we have, let's do an axel. I'll go first. Oh, I'll go second. I'll wait till the music's almost done and then I'll throw myself into the air. My turn? Let's do it. No, me now. There I go. Woo! Finished. Yeah. I was there when that happened and I was just like, what was she doing? And even in practice, she couldn't do it on time. She was in her own little universe and she was flying around. She's like, I'm just going to jump right now. It's like, thanks. So here's an example of a good creative element that doesn't have what most people would consider inherent difficulty, like no flying camels, no axle attempts. But it uses the music, the positions are clear, and the unison's good. So just take a look at how something simple can be well done. So there was two things there, syncopated cartwheels, and then four skaters doing an exaggerated position in Ina Bauer. All three things were done to the music appropriately. Nothing outrageous, but it was very creative. The pattern, the movement, the music, simple, effective, definitely a +2, possibly +3, depending on what you see live at the event itself. Here's another good creative element, quality of positions. Assisted vaults, parapole spiral, flip cartwheels, all to the beat of the music. Pattern, placement, shape, symmetry, had a lot of quality to it. Really used the music well. The quality of the positions was well. Maybe those cartwheels towards the end, or the flip cartwheels were a little sloppy, but the assisted jump went up and over together on the highlights of the music. The pole spirals were good positions. The pattern and shape were quite nice and really matched the music. So it was a good creative element from that team. Here's one more example. Two spinners, interesting position. Unison was good, entry and exit was done. Spread eagles coming around the corner. Inside spread eagle pair pivots done. All done to the highlights of the music. So nothing outrageously difficult for the skaters, but the quality was great, and so definitely merits a positive GOE. Yes, the base value is 2, but in a tight competition, +1 versus 0 can make a huge impact, especially at a category like pre-novice or intermediate or novice. So think about getting those. You should never really be getting a 0 on a creative element unless there's an execution error in something that happens. If you get a 0 just because you haven't done a creative element well or haven't capitalized on your skater's strength, you should really go back and rethink it, because you should try to gain as many points as you possibly can from this, as well as add to your choreography program component, because this is an area where you can be creative, show some movement, also show musical movement for your interpretation program component score as well. Any questions about combined elements or creative elements? No. Okay. Any questions about elements in general? Because that's the end of the examples for the risk versus reward session. Yes?
Comment. So basically what you're saying is some is good, more is not necessarily better.
Correct. The more you do, the more chance there is for error to occur. So if you can do a creative element with all of that stuff very well, some teams can do it, then by all means go. But you can see how adding more gives us more reason to take reductions for errors that we see. Especially if it's a free skating move or free skating element, because that goes towards being part of the creative element itself. So if there's sloppiness happening in the periphery, that's one thing, but if there's a bad flying camel, you can't ignore it. You have to reduce for poor quality. Okay, it is time for a live technical panel simulation. So we are going to watch a program. I'm going to assume the role of technical controller. Christine's going to be the TS, and Courtney's going to be the ATS. We are going to call this program live as if we would in competition, with the exception of not having headsets on. We will then show you what it's like to go through the review process and the things that happen from a technical panel perspective, so you can have a little bit of an inside look as to what happens. We're going to do it from here, or do you want to sit?
No, then they can hear us.
Okay.
You can write there. Are we doing juvenile or?
You want to do that one? Do you have it? Well,
What do you got?
I have it on the screen.
Either or.
Okay.
You can do either one, or both.
We have both.
Yeah. Wait, are we gonna?
Okay. So,
I can't see you guys, I don't know if you want to.
I don't think you know what happened.
yeah. So we are not on the panel yet. We are about to go down for our event, and this is what we as a technical panel do together before we go down. We drop our phone.
Don't even bring them on the panel.
Okay, if things should get wide ever, I'm gonna look left. Courtney, if you can look right. Andrew, if you can observe the hole. Courtney, could you please call the no-hold element value? I will call the step sequence, and then we'll review it, just to make sure we've got everything. I think that's it.
Intersections?
Intersections, yeah, same left and right.
Okay, excellent.
Excuse me, do you have a planned program sheet ready at this point?
Yes.
I do not, I have nothing.
Oh, you don't, okay. Just the ATS, and the controller.
So the team is on the ice. I have my data input operator next to me, and they're like, I have so-and-so on the screen, and I say thank you.
Hang on, just sorry, we are still.
Yeah. The team is ready to skate.
And it's a long transition. Into traveling wheel.
It's pretty long.
Joyous news be spread, the wicked old witch at last is dead.
Traveling wheel.
The witch old witch.
Traveling wheel stalls. Traveling wheel level 1. Intersection group 1, point of intersection 2.
Next transition, into no hold.
Mohawk. Return. Mohawk. Return. No hold group 2, step 1.
Next command box.
Return. Mohawk. Pivoting block level 2.
Next circle.
Circle level 2.
Next move.
If
Moves element level 1, free skate move 1.
And position to end.
I guess Linda was right. There really is no place like home.
So now we're done. Even though that the last element was well before the end of the program, we still have to focus in case there's a fall. Now the program's done. The DIO turns to me and says, we have 6 elements and 1 for review, element number 2. And I say, okay. And the video replay officer comes over and says, element 2, which was the intersection. And I say, Courtney called review on element number 2, and she wants us to look at the middles.
On the spot.
I think there's some.
Okay? So element stands. Please read them back to me.
DIO.
Yeah, so the DIO is now reading back to me.
Traveling wheel level 1, intersection level 1, PI level 2, no hold level 2, step level 1, pivoting block 2, circle level 2, moves element 1, FM 1, no calls.
Are we in agreement? Okay, please confirm. Presses the button, goes to the judges screen, and they hit send. Okay, that's technical panel process. We'll do one more for you that's a little bit more complex.
Sorry, this one, same thing, if you can look left and, sorry, I'll look left and if you can look right, Andrew, if you can oversee it all, if you can call the no hold level, I'll call the steps. And again, I think that's it.
They begin with the transition into
Can we review ice coverage?
Intersection level 2, point of intersection 2.
Can we review the last free skate move, the spiral? We have 9 elements, 3 for review. Classic example of what happens in competition. The coach has not given us a planned program sheet, so we have to wing it, which we did in this case. Which is why you didn't hear Courtney calling out the elements ahead of time, because we don't have a planned program sheet, or you've changed something and there's a new element somewhere, or one is missing. Or something is a transition but it's actually listed as an element and it throws everything off. So Courtney called review on element number 1 because she thought it was a creative, but then we had a combined element at the end. So do we want to review it?
It's probably just a transition.
We should review it just to make sure.
We will review it just for clarification.
So it means requirements for development.
So, okay, so it was executed, it wasn't listed as a transition, it meets the criteria. I now have to go into the system with the DIO, add this as the first element. It goes into the screen and I have to go down to the combined element that we called at the end and delete it.
Now, if we had your sheet and it did say transition at the beginning or the combined element at the end is a transition, we would call on that. But if we have nothing, we call the first thing we see.
Okay. Element number 4 was called for review. That was called by myself. I want to check ice coverage on the wheel travel. Travel starts now. I would say it stops there. I don't think that's 10 meters.
I had traveled 10 before they released you.
Okay. ATS and TRS are in agreement, so this call stays. And then I called review on the free skate movement.
Video replay has sliced this, as we talked about yesterday, so they go right to the element.
Okay, so I'm fine with that. And I think that is flat, that top group, and then after, so I wouldn't give the spiral, I'd only give it an FM1.
That's flat.
So you guys talk.
It wasn't a force fatigue for me.
The fourth on the top,
The second edge was flat for me, and that's why I reduced it the first time.
and then you're okay with the
I was
third
okay
edge?
with the third edge.
I wasn't okay for like time.
Okay, and I am in agreement with Courtney. So we would drop it to moves element, whatever it was, to FM1. FM1. Okay, read them back.
Create element confirmed, line 4, moves element 1, FM2, traveling wheel 3, intersection 2, KI level 2, parallel element 4, pivoting block 2, move element 2, FM1, no hold 2, step 1, no falls.
Are we okay?
Yep.
Confirmed, done.
Can I make a comment just on the not having a planned program sheet? I don't know, for those of you who do singles, we started as a section charging $20 per skater that did not submit a plan program sheet. That will apply to synchro teams. So if you don't put in your plan program sheet, your team is getting charged and you are not allowed to register until a plan program sheet is turned in so that the tech panel can have it.
So you should charge $20 per skater on that one too.
Yeah, would that be?
A lot of cash. So anybody have any questions about the technical panel process? So that's what's going on while you're waiting. We're talking about these things like that. We're looking, and that's how the panel communicates to each other throughout the performance. If we see anything, oftentimes the technical specialist will have to make a call, even if in his or her head she's still undecided about what actually was correct. So, and oftentimes she will call moves element 2, FM2, review blank, because he or she is not certain as to what is actually correct. And so we're always looking to give the benefit of the doubt to skaters. And in instances where the ATS and the TS cannot agree, I had to come in and be the decision. In the original case, I had called the review to begin with. So I already knew what I thought was in my head, but they have to work it out. I can't say, I didn't award this. I can say why I called review, but it's up to these two to come to the decision first if they agree, and if they can't, then I have to mediate and be the tiebreaker, which is what I had to do in that case. Christine's not mad at me that I didn't go with her. She lets it go. Can't win them all, sorry. Okay, some closing thoughts for you guys on the technical package. Don't use the rationale that it's worth more if we do this just to justify choreographing an element that's clearly outside the skill set and capabilities of your skaters. In the end, a well-executed element of lower difficulty will/can earn more points than an incorrectly executed attempt at features required for a higher level. Look at 1966 and do the math to build your best program. Examine the scale of values, figure how harmful a negative GOE can be in addition to having a reduction in the call and base value that you're trying to attempt. Be smart, play to your strengths and skills, and build the best program you possibly can. I gave this presentation Wednesday night to another set of coaches in another province. You hear, just because you don't have high performance synchronized skating in British Columbia doesn't mean you can't generate high performance skaters. So my challenge to you is that every champion starts out somewhere, and we have one in the room who started off at a place people don't imagine champions coming from. You coaches may have one or more of those skaters on your team. So utilize those skills, and maybe we can see one of your skaters on the panel in the future. Okay, thank you for your attention to this part of the presentation. We now have 2 more to do. We're going to take a coffee break.
But before you move, Leslie just has the information.
Oh yeah, I just wanted to quickly tell everybody about the monitoring. In the last couple of years, we have at the Pacific Ice Gala.
Did you want this on back?
So the past couple of years, we've done live monitoring at the gala. We've done video monitoring. Last year, we had some live monitoring down at the gala. We had feedback right after, and we had some good feedback from there. And so this year, the gala and BCYK being back-to-back weekends, what we're going to propose is we've got some ice for in November 15th. It's a Sunday from 10:30 to 2:30. We sang this document out tonight. We will be charging for that monitoring to cover the ice costs. And then we will be offering video monitoring for the clubs that aren't here or behind. So I'll send this out tonight. Please take advantage of it. And if there's any questions, it's always just email me as well. Another thing, the BCYK announcement will be coming out soon, and Hillary said about the we'll be charging the certain program sheets on it. Also, there's they ran it at Summer Skate 2 with the MP3. There's a different way that we're going to be uploading music, so be very, very cognizant and read about that as well. And we're going to put that through back to the West Coast Challenge. And yeah, that's the West Coast Challenge will be in Yay! Skating rink is at Lanyard, sorry.
Little close.
That's coming out as well, and that's February 15th. And then
Bill Hunter.
Pardon me?
Bill Hunter.